we are present here. I do have the honor to introduce this panel and to moderate this panel. This panel is a little bit different because it is focused on a specific profile, and this is ISIS, war for petrol and its impact on the energy security in the region. Now, I hope that this is not, you do not perceive this as trying to absolutize to be extreme about the war for petrol. And the war over petrol is not really the only reason and factor for the conflict, but there are, of course, religious factors and economic factors, so we should take into account many factors that cause the problem, but today we're focusing on energy problems and problems with energy and petrol. In this panel, which I moderate, I do have four participants. Slavcho Neykov, who is an expert on energy policy, engineer Bogomil Manchev, a very outstanding figure in the sphere of energy policy, chair of Bulgarian Atomic Forum, Professor Alexander Nikitin, a representative of the Moscow Institute for Foreign Relations, and the International Black Sea University in Georgia representative, Dr. Nika Chitadze. So we would be happy to hear their statements and opinions on different matters, taking into account the desire of Slavcho Neykov to participate in another meeting. I would change the order of our participants from the last one. He would like to be the first one to speak. Let me mention a few words about him. He got his education in Bulgarian University, then studied in Ireland and in the legislatory and the energy sections as part of his general expert in the Secretary in Brussels and a chair of the energy community in Vienna from 2014 up to now. He's a member of the board of directors in Euroelectric. So I do think that it's a rich biography. Now you have the chance to deliver your message to the audience. My idea is that our participants would take some minutes to present their statements of opinion, and then we would just have a dispute and questions and answers. So we would leave some time for that. Well, I'm in a biblical format now. The last ones become the first ones to speak. So now I would like to mention first and foremost that I'm different from all the speakers who participated so far. I do have the privilege not to present very official institutions. So within our panel, I would like to mention four major things. The first one is related to European policy, including the context of the topic of the refugees and ISIS, in the context of ISIS. I'm not an expert on ISIS and Islamic country, but from the point of view of the refugee problem and crisis, I do think that European policy, and I'm talking about the European policy of the European Union, has to be reconsidered to a great extent. The major concepts of this policy are related primarily to the security of import and this is something correct and proper to do, but the new realities actually bring to the surface another problem: the security and the protection of the energy resources and structures. There has been experts so far who actually predicted that after the terrorist acts in Brussels, Paris and Turkey, other acts will be carried out against telecommunications sources. And in this connection, I would like to remind you that the European Union has a specific legislation and a law dating back from the 2008, something that protects infrastructure, but nowadays it needs to be reconsidered and critically thought over. The second point that I would like to mention is related to the energy security in Eastern Europe. And frankly speaking, I'm a little bit confused. When I heard all the speakers so far, it was like we were talking not so much about the problems in Eastern Europe, but we mentioned pretty much many things about Russia and the role of Russia, which is right to do, but my opinion is that we can't talk about energy security in Eastern Europe without involving Russia, whether we like it or not. And I would mention just a few facts about that. When we talk about the role which Russia plays in the gas problem and petrol, we simply sometimes forget that Russian companies actually control to the very good extent some Eastern European countries, and the fact is that in Eastern Europe the nuclear power and the role is still very much, and in collaboration with Russia the nuclear petrol this matter needs to be reconsidered. Russia objectively does have direct control over not only over energetic companies and infrastructures and other structures. We do have a representative of Moldova here. Not many people really know that Russia also controls transit structure. So the role that which Russia plays cannot be underestimated really, but there has been a tendency in Bulgaria as well, that Russia would be considered an enemy, but it can't be so because we need to cooperate. I hope that in the Black Sea 3 trillion cubic meters of gas would be found, but objectively speaking, this collaboration with Russia will continue. And the third point that I would like to bring up is related with the collaboration with Russia in the spheres of energy, and this has been very positive up to a year in the near past. I would like also to point out that our relationships do not only concern the European Union and Eastern Europe, but all the countries in Eastern Europe, and this cannot be forgotten. From this point of view, I'm not an expert on sanctions really, and I cannot really imagine how these sanctions on behalf of Russia would have positive effect. And the fourth point that I would like to bring up is connected with the fact that within the framework of the European Union we do have common values when it comes to priorities, but through the energy unity in the sphere of energy, we do suffer on an individual basis, and we have our own individual problems. Now I'll give you an example from the point of view of energetic security. energy security in Sofia, in Kiev, in Brussels do have different perceptions and terms. So I will leave you to reach conclusions, but half a month ago there was some piece of information on the Bulgarian newspapers that 8% of Bulgarian population get around 75 euros of pension, the monthly money that pensioners get. Now we can't compare that with the numbers in Brussels, in Ukraine. It's 286. How many people live with just $100 a month in Ukraine? So when we talk about energy and security, we need to be clear about the distinctions and in our countries and all the problems that we face on internal basis. So we also cannot forget that our collaboration in the sphere of energy is based on international agreements like the International Chart and all the rules of the European Union that refer to almost 40 countries in the energetic sphere. The cooperation has its basis there, and this cooperation sometimes takes different forms. Mrs. Denise referred to the relations between Russia and Turkey on the problem of this occasion when the aircraft was put down, but we cannot forget that the relationships between Turkey and Russia continue, and other examples in such direction can be given, too many, but I'll stop here. Now, thank you, Mr. Neykov. The idea is actually for us to ask and answer questions right away. So now you have the chance to address Mr. Neykov, and I would like to ask him if he could describe how within the context of Bulgaria now, what should Bulgaria do as practical steps and measures to be taken now on this day when it comes to national security. When it comes to national security, the first thing that should really be done is to actualize the energy strategy, something which is at the basis of the program which is carried out currently, but it needs to be renovated and refreshed. And Mr. Manchev is here. We lost 11 years getting lost actually in our energy, nuclear energy, and we need to have to play a role in this region, but we're not sure about that. And another thing that needs to be done is to refresh our relations with Russia from the point of view of the new relations and the current issues that we're facing. We do have common interests, and we cannot make it on our own. This is a regional problem. It's not a national problem, so we can't make it on our own. Maybe not many people know, but in a country such as Serbia, 16% of most of the taxes are paid by transport. Now, you can imagine what social dimensions such investments do have. So from here, the common problem to preserve, to protect the infrastructure comes to the front, and it needs to be renovated and reconsidered, as well as the role of Bulgaria and its energy policy. Plamen Nikol. Thank you. Plamen Nikol. Now I'll remind you of some I'm not going to ask a question, but I would like to just comment on the thesis that was in 1996, Russia, on its own will, through bribes, it stopped the
terminated the second part of the Yambul agreement, and it had to get supplied with gas on good prices and not bandit prices. We pay like $500, although this is in a gas supply mix combined, both with production from Turkmenistan and Russia. Coming from Turkmenistan, Russia buys it for $80, 80, and it is internationally acknowledged to have 30% on top of this price to cover expenses for transport and maintenance. Once again, in front of all this honorable audience, I would like to confirm Bulgaria is not going to have a second nuclear power station as we used to have it. Well, this was just a position, not a question. Next one, please. Thank you. I have the following question coming out of a statement made by the Minister of Energy with our high hopes of finding gas and oil in the Black Sea. And if we find resources of this type, we are surely going to use them for at least a long period of time, but by then, 10 years from now, how do you see the alternative measures of getting to this energy supply, because a decade is quite a long period of time and we cannot wait for this long period of time, and how can we provide for our energy independence? I fully agree with Mr. Petkov's viewpoint on the time frame related to these types of developments. It is totally true for large infrastructure projects just like TAP, South Stream. These are large investments and they really do take their share of time. Whether we speak about new power plant, nuclear power plant, and this is something that was approved by the government or the parliament, but meanwhile, according to me, Bulgaria has two big pocket reserves. One of them is called energy efficiency. In Bulgaria, energy efficiency, according to official statistics, I'm sorry, not energy protection and efficiency, but a unit of energy in a ratio to the GDP, the gross domestic product, and this is quite a good reserve, quite a high number. The other option we have, of course, under the Commission, that we have the very low consumption of energy. Right now we have huge stores of energy in stock, and most probably we're going to continue using this low consumption of energy, but by introducing new technologies in the area of coal industry, thermal power plants, and use of coals. I, of course, don't speak about the American power plant stations, but we should not forget, last but not the least, the boom that is also coming here on the renewable energy sources, and with the exception of water, of course. But generally, once again, I say the problem is we do not have a long-term vision on updating nationally where we are heading. I don't say it is wrong that we import electricity, but it is bad not to know what we want. I think I managed to answer. I see one more hand raised over there. I already asked something in the morning, but allow me to become a fool now. But let me ask something to our Russian guest. Obviously, Russians do compromises when they provide and supply energy, and since we are dependent on them, and with certain sympathy, they tend to agree for better conditions. Is there an opportunity or a possibility, without contradicting roughly to our engagements related to NATO and the EU, is it possible we get better conditions than the ones we currently have? And one more supplement to it. Mr. Ivan Tsenov made a research recently. These 3 times higher our energy production is not related to lack of new technologies or energy efficient technologies, but something we call non-reporting of the expenses and theft. There are some end users who do not pay and who are not reported that they are using energy and power supply. When we speak about Russia, is your question related to gas? Okay, everything. In regards to gas, we must take into consideration a large change that happened in less than 10 years now. We used to consume 6.5 billion cubic meters, and right now we use like a third out of this quantity. So we have the following question: is it only about security of supply, but also security and provision of use? Gas contracts, they have it take or pay clause, so it means that whenever you negotiate on something, are you going really to be able to use this quantity of gas? Because no matter you use it or not, you are obliged to pay it. As an alternative, if everything is possible, and if scientists really manage to find these deep deposits, large deposits, there are 2 options that are under discussion right now, but of course they have to be nationally approved under the program called Energy Program. Speaking about Greece, this is one of these options. It is called liquid gas. Whoever goes and visits Azerbaijan goes and negotiates for at least 1 billion liters of square cubic liters of gas, liquid gas, but we don't have the camels, so to say, to transport it here. Speaking about nuclear energy, I think Mr. Manchev is the person who can tell you the best, but personally, allow me to say, this is a field where Bulgaria, at least I personally do not remember of having certain issues in the relationships, but it is a matter of technologies that change quite difficult. Several times we mentioned about the relations between Ukraine and Russia, but do you know that more than 0.5% of the energy provided all around Ukraine has been produced in nuclear power plant stations produced by Russians? Even more than 65%, somebody corrected me here. So policy, politics, and economy sometimes overlap, but other times they don't have common points.